The next question is a personal one. A murid finds herself very affected by the ups and downs of life. She goes from feeling elated and connected to Allah to allowing negativities around her to deplete her until she's consumed by sadness, jealousy, and anger. She wants to know if there's a zikr or wazifa that can help her.
Yes, of course, that's the difficulty. That's precisely when one has experienced a certain elation through a spiritual practice. It's even harder to cope with all the things which come rushing in once you complete the prayer or in different circumstances. So that's a real challenge in many different ways. And I think the best thing one can say about this, of course, this is a very common problem for everybody, that distinction between the condition you are in when you are in meditation or you are in prayer, and, of course, everything which comes tumbling upon you as from the outside life with all those problems and difficulties and disappointments. So, in a way, I suppose the best is to try, once you come out of your meditation or your prayer, or whatever you've been doing, to try, so to speak, to kind of inwardly maintain a kind of reserve. You have a kind of reserve of supply, not to say, of that inner conditioning. Don't let it escape. Try to feel that it is a kind of, a very vital, but still a different dimension of your being, but as a dimension which as such is remained. So try to maintain that sense of being, of maintaining that inwardness, also when you are plunged back in all these problems and human problems of the everyday life. Of course, there are very elaborate ways of training the human ego, the human outward being, in different ways in order to prepare the person ever better for this development in the spiritual life. They're all there, either by the world renouncing systems or also by the world affirming systems, and very much so in the work of Hazrat Inayat, where the development of the personality precedes, in fact, the further steps in spiritual development. But so there again, one of those traditions of meditation again includes again that mastery of the breath. If you have been in a deep sense of prayer or of meditation or whatever you've done, and you try to maintain that on the breath in such a way that it is, so to speak, always present, even if you have let go of it for a certain time, then again you may be confronted with certain difficulties or certain problems or certain disappointments. Try to have that reserve, this is built up in yourself, and which through, again, that connection of the breath, which runs, as Moshe tells us, through the whole of one's being, not just through the lungs and the nostrils, but it is that kind of rhythm in the human being. Moshe always quotes the pulsation, the heartbeat, and everything is connected to that. And so if something of that inner reserve is present, and you can, so to speak, apply that. So you are in one part of your being is confronted with disappointments and distress, but there is some inner strength in you which maintains all the same something of your meditative life as well. So that in that way, of course, gradually ever more, one can develop that facility of gradually allowing these negative elements of your mind, of your spirit, of your whatever it is in you, so to speak, to disappear in time. But again, in Sufism is also a practice, not only, but a training. And all these things take their time. So, I mean, maturing in any kind of spiritual culture is always a process of growth. And every process of growth needs time. But it also needs consistency, to continue it, to be aware of the way you are going, and to be confident that in that way one outgrows all these limitations of outer self, of the ego. But it's perfectly natural to have an ego. You couldn't be without it. And Moshe can say, so that is the one thing that forever remains with human beings. But the idea of training it, of submitting it, the outer awareness to the inner reality, well, that is quite a process, quite a challenge. But once you start it, be consistent, try to continue it in one way or another, and accept that the process of growth simply is, well, as I said, it's not a principle, as Moshe always say, but it is a process. And so try to maintain that process to the extent you're able to do so. But always think the comparison, something, Moshe says, if there were no growth, there were no beauty. The beauty is in the growth. The beauty is, in a wider sense, the joy of the journey. So try to be confident that if you're in a process of growth, you will arrive, you will develop. A child doesn't expect that today he, so to speak, he eats a lot of food in order tomorrow to be taller, to have grown up much faster because I've eaten that much. Well, that's not going to happen, of course. Next day, he might hardly be any greater, however he eats, but the next day he will still be the same person he was the previous day. So allow for that process and try to cultivate, if not that patience, at the kind of naturalness of a child which knows he is developing, he is growing up, but doesn't worry from day to day whether or not he has sufficiently grown. And that is that kind of spontaneous attitude by which one, as I say, pursues this path and by which one overcomes all these awful kind of things, which of course all of us are tortured by in our human life. But in life of humanization, life of egos, all of us are in a constant torture. But to overcome the sense of it, maybe not the fact of it, but certainly the sense of it being so much affected by all these influence from the outside and much mistrust and all that kinds of jealousies and problems one has, to overcome those by gradually outgrowing them. They are still there, but you look at them from a different perspective. I remember one day somebody, a group of German Murids, were in South Africa and sent me a picture postcard of a number of giraffes. And he wrote on it, Sufis always look at things from a higher point of view. So that was really a perfectly sound advice. And so I'm not going to tell you should turn into a giraffe, but I mean, all the same, it is sensible to think that with time, you outgrow things, and things change their perspective, not their present, but the perspective you get on them, you get of them. So, talk me much again, please, Kezia.
Well, just to underscore what you've said, I'm reminded of a story that Moshe tells, the story of a king who put a challenge to the philosophers at the court, and said, I want you to bring me something that will make me happy when I'm sad, but also which will make me sad when I'm happy. So, and they had 40 days, and they would be punished if they didn't fulfill the requirements in the given allotment of time. So they were very worried and not sure what to do, but they conferred, and finally they came back in 40 days, and they had something in a box. And the king opened the box, and it was a ring. And on the ring, something was inscribed. And the king read what was inscribed, and it said, "This too shall pass."
How can that sound?